Starbucks or local coffee shop?
I make it. We make it at home. Yeah. My wife is all about her latte. So when she makes it, she makes me a cappuccino.
Nice. And the most important thing to ask though is what kind of milk do you use? Because I know for me, so I'm in a hotel, obviously, so I've got the hotel, but I bring my own iced coffee and I bring my own creamer, and it's a mixture of almond and coconut.
Wow, that's fancy.
So what's your go-to milk?
We're classic whole milk. But sometimes if in my office I have the hazelnut creamer, which is kind of guilty pleasure. It's quite delicious, but typically whole milk.
Awesome. Well, I want to read out some of the comments. Jonathan said, I start off the morning with a triple espresso, which is like rocket fuel. Wow. I want to know if he takes that black or if he actually puts any. I would assume with espresso, you don't put creamer in it, right? I've never had one.
No, if you just try straight espresso, that's rocket fuel.
Wow, our supply chainers are on fire because Michael says 4-shot espresso, iced almond milk latte. 4 shots. Wow, this just goes to show how much coffee we need as supply chain professionals to get through our day. We've got Shira with a regular hot cup of coffee, and George, I leave my house with a tall black coffee to get and keep my brain organized for the morning. I love that. I love that. So anyways, we know from all the supply chain professionals that they definitely need their rocket fuel in the morning. I can't really blame them, you know? All right, so now it's time to get to our market update. So Akshay, what are you talking to people about? What's top of mind for everybody in the industry right now that you're talking to? I mean, obviously, there's some uncertainty. I mean, just a little bit, right? But we've kind of been living with uncertainty since the pandemic. So it's just a different kind of uncertainty. So I almost feel like we've kind of gotten used to it. Although this one kind of rocks the boat a little bit because we have to change all of our systems and the tariffs and the duties and all of that kind of stuff. So it really does add a lot more work to our plates.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. We work most, like for example, in our world, most of our customers move over 100 containers a month. So now imagine if a large percentage of them, you can't pick them up before you fork over millions of dollars each week.
Right.
So it's not just the uncertainty, but the stress that these companies are going through right now. Stress of having to come up with the money. If you're importing from into the U.S. from China, where you have 100+% tariff, and then the stress of having to maybe rebalance your supply chain because of the uncertainty. So I know we'll talk about that a little bit, but to be honest, like a lot of the folks don't want to talk to me right now because they're busy, and I get it, right? It's chaotic times.
It definitely is. Now, you said that people have to pay it ahead of time.
Yeah, so you have to. Usually, you will pay tariffs when you're filing them.
Right.
That's generally before you can pick up the container at the port at the destination, and so that's a large number. So if your goods if there's about $100,000 or $300,000 worth of cargo in a 40-foot container, you can do the math. It's a lot of money that you have to pay to the government.
Well, it's not only that too, right? If we think about cash flow at the moment, there's not a lot of capital that is flowing necessarily into the industry to be able to handle some of this disruption and the uncertainty, to be able to pay some of this upfront. And I 100%. Think an article that Audrey sent to me yesterday that I haven't used yet talks about how the most impact is actually on small business, because they don't have the capital to be able to pay some of these large costs ahead of time to be able to bring products. And like you said, redesigning supply chains, but that doesn't happen overnight. Like that, if you have to source from somewhere, you need to find the supplier, you need to vet the supplier, you need to make sure the quality of the goods are there, right? So this really is sort of an upheaval, and you can see why supply chain professionals are really busy right now.
Yeah. 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 And it's all happened. And the crazy thing is, while you might be making some plans, the plans might be upended in a day or two or three, because that's what happened last week. It's like, people were making plans on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The tariffs changed. So yeah, it's not a great time.
Well, no, and you're right. I mean, we're, like I said earlier, right? Supply chain professionals have been through uncertainty over the last couple of years. But you kind of, in this kind of scenario, with things changing all the time, I mean, are you going to have to put up millions because it's 100% or 100% plus tariffs? Or are you going to announce it one day and then the next day not like take it back? But you've already invested that money to be able to get your goods because you needed to do that day to make sure you got the goods coming in so that you can deliver to your customers. I mean, that's just, talk about frustrating. If you put up millions of dollars and then the next day they're like, oh, no, our mistake.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, it's because we're talking about hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of like just disruption happening. And yeah, to your point, the companies that are going to feel this the most are the small businesses, and we need them the most, right? Like, it's so hard to run a business, and suddenly you can go bankrupt. And not to mention the consumer sentiment might go down, right? Like the buying sentiment, like people might get a lot more conservative if they see this whiplash happening. And so, there's a little bit of existential. We might head into a recession as well, which is not a fun thing to think about.
No, and also like planning. You can't really plan with all of this going on because you just don't know from a day-to-day perspective what that looks like and how much money you have to shell out for duties and tariffs and all that. All right, let's get to our first article. Now, I thought this was a bit of a fun one because it has to do with eggs. And the US is dealing with this crisis of eggs being very expensive, or there being a shortage because of a variety of different reasons, one being an avian flu, I believe. I was just recently at a Trader Joe's and they had eggs for a great price. So we picked up 2 of them and then we got stopped by the egg police at the register because they said you're only allowed to buy 1, which I can understand because of the shortage. But this article actually talks about how people are trying to smuggle eggs across the border, which I think is really interesting because I didn't really think that eggs weren't allowed to cross the border. I think back to when I grew up in BC, every weekend we would go to the US and pick up milk, bread, and eggs on a regular basis. I mean, it was kind of what we did on the weekend. And now they're saying that that we're not allowed to bring them across. So Akshay, what did you think about this article? What were some of your takeaways?
Kind of crazy. I mean, it's like, are we investing enough in our supply chain, as a country, to withstand these kind of, I mean, we shouldn't be running out of eggs. But on the other side, it's also interesting. There's incentives to smuggle eggs into the country, and so I kind of looked into it a little bit, and it doesn't cost much to make eggs. Just the range of making a dozen eggs is like 50 cents to $1. So, I mean, in Whole Foods here, eggs are like $10 sometimes, $8 to $10. So that's a nice little margin. You can see even with 100% tariff on it, you can make a lot of money. But it's kind of unfortunate that we have to seize eggs out of all things. It's not like something you can mess with, right? Like, so yeah, it's kind of weird.
Well, and also with everything going on, eggs being sort of the top of the list. But it was interesting in this article that they said that San Diego has seen 158% increase in eggs trying to be smuggled across the border, which I thought was interesting. But then they also talked about how they're trying to reach deals with South Korea and Turkey to be able to import eggs from those locations. And I thought that was fairly interesting in the time where we're talking about tariffs and we're talking about what that means for goods being imported in the US. How are we doing these trade deals on eggs when we're having such a hard time with tariffs across the board? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, believe it or not, we always have eggs, and I don't have eggs because of this problem.
Well, I'll tell you, if you have a Trader Joe's near you, Trader Joe's was actually fairly reasonable. Where was the other place I was the other day? They had some reasonable. They were not $13. They were like $3 and $4. So don't everybody go there at once, because I still need to get eggs too.
I'm getting hungry.
But I will say that the shelves at Sprouts when I was there the other day were completely empty of eggs. There was only the cartons of 6 eggs. So we are seeing it in a variety of different ways across a variety of different retailers. All right. So now, you what?
We are in 𝐓𝐡𝐨𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐴𝐵. I don't even know how to say that, you know.
An eggopolis? Egg. I don't even know if anybody can help us with that.
Yeah, please, if you can pronounce that. You know what we're talking about, but it's like an apocalypse, but with eggs. 𝐓𝐴𝐵𝐴𝐵.
Well, and actually, funny story. So I was listening to the mayor. Is it the mayor of Florida? I don't know. They came on the radio and they were talking about how Easter is coming up for this weekend. And they were encouraging everybody to, instead of use eggs and decorate eggs, to actually decorate potatoes.
Don't hold the tape, but that would be like just a weird Easter. Like, why are these eggs looking like that? That's a big egg.
But also they're cheaper. And listen, they might be easier to decorate. So I think they might be on something, you know?
Right.
Who knew Florida was so innovative?
The eggs that have humps.
Anyways, we'll see what people come up with this weekend. But you might want to consider potatoes if eggs are getting a little bit too expensive. All right. So the next article that we have, I actually have 2 that I want to show, and they kind of are very, very different in a variety of different ways. And I think they're quite interesting to show back to back. So this particular article talks about how China's container crisis, they've got falling rates. So there's a buildup of containers at the ports in China. There's declining cargo prices because of weak cargo demand. So not everybody is moving cargo from China right now because of what we've been talking about in the fact that there are these tariffs, and not everybody can afford to bring product in at this moment. So container prices are going down. It's hitting a lot of regions in Asia at the moment. And the ports like the port of LA are actually expecting a 10% decline in volume. So Akshay, what did you think about this one? And then we're going to get to the next one, which is quite interesting because it's a steamship line looking to invest all sorts of money. But let's stay on this one first.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at like February from a volume perspective was like a peak pandemic, even more than pandemic, and then March was a sharp decline, and so we can see that like demand is cooling a little bit, and now I think it's going to cool even more because of, you know, if you want to call it reshoring, being balanced of the supply chain. I mean, I think the thing to consider here is how do we prepare for a world where China is no longer the center of gravity of manufacturing, right? And so the question is how bad is this going to get? I think this will be a continued trend, but it might get worse.
Well, and you know, that's kind of interesting because we haven't even hit May 2nd, which is the tariffs and the de minimis. And for anybody who doesn't understand what that means, a lot of companies can import in the US under the de minimis. And right now that de minimis threshold, I believe, is about $800. So you can imagine the kind of packages. If you're buying fast fashion from China overseas, from those kind of retailers, they can bring in packages of a ton of different products into the country under that $800 de minimis. But that's going to change as of May 2nd. So Right now, we're seeing volumes decrease, and that doesn't include the small packages that come from some of those fast fashion retailers in Asia. And so when this happens on May 2nd, we actually might see even more of a decline in product actually coming in containers from China as well, right?
Yeah, certainly. So definitely on air cargo too, because a lot of those packages come over post.
Good point.
Yeah, and the rates will go down, and then I think more containers piling up at the ports. It will affect a lot of businesses, including freight forwarding and trucking companies that are going to be fighting over the same boxes.
I want to give a shout out over to Faisal on my personal LinkedIn. They said Easter potatoes, wow, tariff innovations. No kidding, right? And then Diego says, don't forget to increase your customs bonds. That's an interesting perspective as well, because if you are paying these high tariffs, you're going to have to pay duties at this end. And if you have a bond, you're going to have to be able to increase that. And let me tell you, those companies don't like to increase that, and they don't like to increase the risk either. Want to say hi over to Simon over on my personal LinkedIn as well. All right, let's get to the second article that is kind of contradictory to what we were just talking about. So this came out early March. 𝐂𝐸-𝐶𝐭𝐬 is a steamship line. They obviously move containers back and forth all over the world. They are headquartered in France, but they do move goods and containers to and from the US and China as well. What they're talking about is how they're going to be investing $20 billion in US operations. So I'm wondering what they know that we don't know, because if we're talking about recession, we're talking about container prices decreasing, we're talking about a weak cargo demand. How are they investing this kind of money into US operations? And let me break it down for you. 400 warehouses, 30 more vessels. If we have weaker cargo demand, how are they adding 30 more vessels? And also 10,000 US jobs. Now, just to put it into perspective, this is one of the reasons why we're having these conversations about tariff. They want this kind of investment. But I just don't understand how they're going to invest this kind of money when everything is shifting downward. Akshay, what do you think?
I mean, I think some of it could be because of this. The White House is about to tax, put a tariff or a fine, rather, as to how they like to put it, on vessels that are Chinese made. So. Right. It could be appeasing to the president of the United States, and I think the president likes these kinds of announcements. So when he finds somebody to do it with, he'll do it. But 𝐶𝐸 is quite, as a French company, it's very heavily invested into the North American supply chain. So I can see them just strengthening their position into in and out of the United States, especially for the European routes and maybe even the Asian routes. So I'm not surprised. I think we'll see more of this happening, where it could be the European companies remove some of the Chinese vessels from, if that plan goes into effect, right? Because it's $1.5 million per port call, which is just a lot of money. So yeah, I think I'm sure it's welcome by our White House. And look, I think with diminishing volume, we will still have a lot of containers.
I guess we'll see how it plays out.
Right? We will be moving containers globally. So I don't think that'll change.
There we go. Sorry, sorry, my internet is a little wonky this morning, so I think that was me. I wasn't sure if that was your internet or mine, but anyways, I think you're right. I think, and it would be great to hear from anybody who's watching this, just to hear a little bit more about your take on the fact that there's weakening demand, but then there's also this investment in the US. I mean, Audrey and I talked about this last week about the 1.5 million. It really only means a few, maybe a couple $100 for each importer. And so it's not, a huge cost, but obviously it's a bit of a pain in the ass. or a pain in the butt. Sorry. All right, so let's get to our last article. Now, this one I thought was a little bit fun. I don't know if any of you saw this on Instagram the other day, but if you come from our generation, you remember the Concorde. I never rode on a Concorde. If you rode on a Concorde, I want to know, because I would have loved to before they took this out of commission. But they transported this Concorde. I guess it was restored. It was in a museum, and then it got restored. And they moved the Concorde by boat. And so I thought it was a little bit of an oxymoron how we were seeing a plane being transported by boat. But really, this is transportation of cargo at its finest. What did you think about this, Akshay? I'm sure for those in New York City, this was quite a spectacle.
I mean, I just have to say, it's such a beautiful plane. You know, I'm so sad that we don't have the Concorde anymore. Because it was like an engineering marvel and a British marvel. The good news is there is a company that I've been tracking called Boom Supersonic that is gung-ho on replacing the Concorde. So they're building their own, you know, plane that can go between London and New York in about 2 hours. But yeah, I mean, I don't have to say much. Look at the photo, like it speaks for him. So it would be a spectacle. I would go out and see that plane move across the Hudson.
Right. And this is just like transportation and logistics at its finest. Nothing has to go necessarily by truck, air, and ocean alone. We can actually do it, but we can do both at the exact same time. I thought this was amazing. The good news is
you are thrilled by moving the plane on a boat.
Yes. That was the part that I loved. I was like, I need to show everybody this, because this is such a kind of an oxymoron, right? But the good news is, for those that are trying to bring the Concorde back, all of the comments in this Instagram post was saying that they wanted to bring the Concorde back. So they're going to have a lot of people interested in being part of that movement. But anyways, I thought that was fun. We put the link in the comments for you so that you can go and check out those pictures. But yeah, again, logistics and transportation at its finest. Well, I think we talked a lot about a lot of today. Huh?
Never a dull day.
Never a dull day in logistics, transportation, supply chain. We covered a lot of topics today. We covered tariffs. We covered what's happening in China, the weakened cargo demand. We talked about how visibility is going to be an important factor for that. But, right, people are really focusing on their supply chains at the moment. We talked about how CMA is going to invest large dollars in the U.S. economy, and how eggs is really a supply chain story at the moment. Well, Akshay, thank you so much for joining me on Thoughts and Coffee. Thank you to everybody in the audience for tuning in today.